Good morning. Don't forget your warm glass of water. It's a small kindness to your body. Now, picture this. Your mother-in-law asks you to skip your only family beach trip, just in case your sister-in-law goes into labor, 3 weeks early. Is this care, control, or classic toxic mill behavior? So here's the full picture. My husband and I had finally planned our yearly beach trip with my side of the family, something I look forward to all year long. It's not just a vacation, it's a lifeline. Ever since I moved away from my hometown to be closer to my husband's family, yes, including his mother, this 1 week is the only chance I get to reconnect with my parents, siblings, nieces, and nephews. Real, quality time. But just 3 weeks before the trip, my mother-in-law sat us down with a serious concern. She told us she expected us to cancel our vacation because my sister-in-law was due to give birth around that time. Now, let's be clear, her due date was still 3 weeks after our planned departure, and my SIL hadn't asked for this. She hadn't made any big announcement or request. She seemed calm, unbothered, and very capable. But MIL? Oh no, she had this vision of all the siblings waiting in the hospital lounge together, like it was a family reunion. I asked, what if she doesn't go into labor? What if it's late? Or early? Her answer, well, you need to be available just in case. To be honest, it hit a nerve. I've made so many sacrifices for my husband's side of the family. I uprooted my life, moved hours away from my own parents, and adjusted to living a few blocks from my MIL. I've attended every birthday, every barbecue, every last-minute dinner, because that's what you do for family, right? But where's the line between family support and emotional manipulation? This started to feel like one of those toxic mother-in-law dynamics you hear about in those crazy MIL stories, where guilt is weaponized and your own boundaries vanish. It wasn't about whether I wanted to be there for my SIL. I do, but it felt like I wasn't being allowed to choose because the expectation was already decided for me. And when I gently pushed back, saying we'd still go on the trip, that's when the whispers started. Selfish, disrespectful. Suddenly, I was the villain in some twisted relationship drama where the daughter-in-law chooses fun over family loyalty. But here's the thing. Isn't it also betrayal when your own needs are repeatedly dismissed in favor of someone else's narrative? I started to wonder, how often do wives get caught in this battle between their own voice and their husband's mom drama? How many of us are silently navigating narcissistic mother-in-law guilt wrapped in a smile and the phrase, "It's just family"? So let me ask you, if this happened to you, would you skip your one chance at family joy just in case someone else might need you? Or would you finally draw the line? Let me ask you something honest. At what point does being supportive start to feel like being erased? After that talk with my mother-in-law, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't being asked to stay home. I was being expected to. And worse, any disagreement was quietly labeled as selfish. The language was subtle, but the message was loud and clear. Good daughters-in-law don't say no. And that's when the guilt-tripping began. I overheard her on the phone with one of the other siblings, saying, well, I guess some people prioritize the beach over family milestones. I wasn't even in the room, but I felt the sting. It was like I was suddenly cast as the villain in one of those wife versus mother-in-law stories, where no matter what you do, you're painted as cold, detached, or worse, disloyal. I talked to my husband, hoping he'd understand, and to his credit, he tried. But I could see the conflict in his eyes. That's what people don't talk about enough in these husband-mom drama situations. The emotional tug-of-war. He didn't want to upset his mom, but he also didn't want to let me down. And stuck between the two women he cares most about. He froze. Honestly, I don't blame him. But I also couldn't let his silence make the decision for me. Because what bothered me most wasn't just the pressure, it was the assumption that I didn't have my own family to care about, that my side didn't matter, that my one trip a year was somehow less important than an event we might not even witness. It started to feel like one of those narcissistic mother-in-law patterns I've read about, where everything revolves around her expectations, her feelings, her vision of how things should go, and suddenly your needs are just an inconvenience. So I drew a line. I told her, respectfully, that we'd be going on our trip as planned. I said I loved my Sil, and we'd be thrilled to meet the baby as soon as we returned. But we wouldn't put our life on hold for a maybe. You'd think that would be the end of it. But what followed was a slow, cold shift. Invitations stopped. Group texts became strangely quiet. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a trip. This was about control, wrapped in the disguise of family unity. And it made me wonder, how many of us are stuck in this cycle of family betrayal, where keeping the peace means losing your own voice? So here's my question to you. Have you ever had to choose between your boundaries and your place in the family? And if so, what did you lose to keep the peace? Here's something I never thought I'd admit out loud. When you finally stand your ground with a toxic mother-in-law, the silence can be louder than any argument. After we confirmed our beach plans, the tension didn't explode, it simmered. Quiet dinners turned into awkward glances. I'd walk into a room and suddenly feel like an outsider in a family I'd tried so hard to blend into. No direct insults, no raised voices, just that cold politeness that tells you you're being punished and everyone knows why. But what really shook me was how quickly the rest of the family followed her lead. My husband's younger sister, who I'd always gotten along with, suddenly stopped texting. His aunt, who used to send me holiday recipes, left me out of the family group chat entirely. It was like a silent campaign had begun, and I was the villain in a relationship drama podcast nobody asked me to join. And let's be honest, this wasn't about a vacation anymore. This was about power, control, the idea that the daughter-in-law needs to fall in line or face social exile. Classic narcissistic mother-in-law behavior, where love and loyalty are conditional and quietly withdrawn if you dare to challenge her version of what's best. It felt eerily similar to some of those crazy mill stories we've all heard, except this wasn't fiction. This was my real life, and I was living in a family system where silence was the weapon of choice. Still, I kept asking myself, is it worth it? Was holding my boundary really worth losing my place in this family? And that's when I remembered something that changed everything. A conversation I had with my mum, months before the drama started. She said, "You don't need to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm." At the time, I brushed it off. But now, it hit me straight in the chest. I had spent years trying to be the peacekeeper, the flexible one, the easy daughter-in-law who never made waves. But where did it get me? Burned out, overlooked, and now punished for daring to say, "My family matters too." That realization didn't make the tension go away, but it did bring clarity. This wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about setting a new precedent, one where love doesn't require obedience, where respect isn't a one-way street. I think many of us, especially women, have been conditioned to avoid conflict, to keep the family machine running smoothly, even if it runs us over in the process. But what if the real act of love is saying no when something hurts? So let me ask you, have you ever experienced this kind of family betrayal? Not through yelling or blame, but through quiet exclusion. And how did you find your voice again when the people around you were trying to silence it? Let me ask you something we don't talk about enough. What happens when saying boundaries makes you the bad guy, even to the person you love most? After the beach trip drama and the cold shoulder from my in-laws, things between me and my husband got quiet. Not angry, not loud, just distant. That part surprised me the most. I thought we were on the same page. He said he supported me. He said it was okay to go on the trip. But in the weeks that followed, it felt like I was carrying the emotional weight of the whole situation, alone. This is where things get tricky in these wife versus mother-in-law stories. It's rarely a fight about who's right or wrong. It's about who your partner chooses to emotionally align with. And when my husband started defaulting to, "Let's not upset my mum," I realized just how deep the mother-in-law guilt programming runs. It didn't help that the baby was born while we were on vacation. Perfect timing, right? My toxic mother-in-law now had the ultimate ammo. And believe me, she used it. "If only you'd been here," she said, over and over, like a passive-aggressive lullaby. The truth is, we couldn't have made it in time, even if we'd left the second we got the call. But that didn't matter. Facts rarely do in a narcissistic mother-in-law's narrative. What mattered was optics, perception, her version of the story. And in that story, I wasn't a caring daughter-in-law. I was the one who chose the beach over family. I'll admit, part of me wanted revenge. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind. The true revenge of choosing peace over pleasing. I started saying no more often. No to spontaneous dinners that came with strings attached. No to last-minute family obligations that always left me drained. And most importantly, no to the idea that I had to earn my place by sacrificing my needs. It wasn't easy. My husband and I had long talks, some of them painful. We had to face the unspoken truth that while we married each other, we were both still deeply entangled in our family's expectations. But something shifted when I stopped tiptoeing and started talking, really talking, not about who was to blame, but about what we wanted our marriage to look like, where our loyalty should live. I won't pretend everything got magically better. Healing from family betrayal takes time, but for the first time, I felt like I was standing in my own truth, without apology. So here's what I want to ask you today. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with your partner after setting boundaries with their family? And how did you navigate the silent fallout when love and loyalty were pulling in different directions? Have you ever looked around at a room full of people and suddenly realized you don't belong there anymore? That moment hit me a few weeks after the baby was born. We were invited to a small family celebration. My husband thought it might be a sign that the ice was thawing, that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to normal. I wasn't sure what normal even meant anymore, but I went, for him, and I sat there holding a gift, smiling politely, listening to everyone share how amazing it was to have the whole family present during the birth, except of course for us. My toxic mother-in-law didn't need to say anything. She just looked at me, smiled that cold smile, and moved on. She didn't want peace, she wanted to win. And in her mind, I was the outsider who didn't play by her rules, another chapter in her ever-growing collection of crazy MIL stories. But this time, something inside me shifted. I realized I didn't want back in if it meant erasing who I was. I wasn't going to shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. Not anymore. That's not love. That's control. And it's exactly what so many of us face in these wife versus mother-in-law stories that never seem to end. You give an inch and they want your whole life. So I quietly left the party early. No drama, no speeches, just peace. That's the thing people don't talk about enough. Sometimes the true revenge in these situations isn't yelling or proving a point. It's choosing your own well-being over the chaos. It's building a life where you get to decide what family means, not someone else. And thankfully, my husband saw that too. Not overnight, but over time. We started creating our own rhythms, our own holidays, our own boundaries. And for the first time in years, I felt free. No more guilt trips, no more walking on eggshells, just a quieter, healthier version of family that we built together. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, wow, this sounds just like my life, then you are not alone. These stories are far more common than people admit. That's why this isn't just a relationship drama podcast. It's a family betrayal podcast, a healing podcast, a truth-telling space for anyone who's been caught between love, loyalty, and their own voice. And here's where you come in. Drop a quick comment. Team beach trip or team stay home. That's it, 2 words. No essays, no overthinking. Just tell me where you stand. Let's make this comment section a safe space for all of us dealing with our own justnomil podcast moments.